Hey there, folks. This is Jay Frost speaking to you, of course, from the Philanthropy Mastermind series. If you're new to this party, welcome. And if you've been hanging around and attending other sessions, it's great to have you back. Of course, as you know, we do have many sessions in this series already recorded and waiting for you over at the site of our sponsor, DonorSearch. So often we're asked about two things. First, where do you get this content? And that's once again over at donorsearch.net under the resources tab, as well as recordings that you'll find directly on their YouTube channel. That's the DonorSearch YouTube channel. But also people ask about DonorSearch. And I'm sorry to say that we don't talk much about them in the series. And that's not through any lack of affection, but rather this is a platform they have generously provided for you, for all of us in the field of fundraising and philanthropy, going back to 2016. This is, if my count is right now, episode 591. And we are offering lots of different content. And today's, I know, is especially important for many of us because much of our lives have been revolved around this issue about trying to raise money in the form of grants, whether it's identifying who makes them, writing those grant proposals, the whole planning process before trying to write that proposal, maybe the contact with the grant makers, lots of things. And as a former grant maker, and many years ago, a person who compiled a book about successful grant proposals, I can tell you, I'm as in the dark as probably many of you are about this. And that's why I'm really grateful that we have someone who can tell us all about that today. And before I introduce her to you, I want to encourage you to be a part of the conversation. Some of you are already doing that. And I really want to thank you for doing it and for warming up the chat. So hello to Ryan and Karina and Diana and Jessica and Megan and Noel and all the others who are saying hello there. Please keep that space warm. I know it would be particularly important and helpful to our presenter today if she knows maybe where you're from, which part of the country or the world. We often have people from around the world, but also maybe which organization you're with or what you do, or both of those things. That's going to be really helpful as she brings you through some terrific content on this subject about grants. So again, thank you to all of you who are taking advantage of that right there. Use the Q&A as well as the chat throughout today. We're going to save up all your comments and questions and provide those to our guest at the conclusion of our presentation. So stick around so you can get those answers. But right now, I want to introduce to you, of course, Marie Palacios. Marie, of course, is the lead consultant at Funding for Good. If you don't know their work, I know you'll learn a bit more about it today, but you can also check out a link that we'll be providing you in the chat for the firm, as well as for information on Marie and her extensive background. But I don't want to take up oxygen and time away from her presentation. So I just want to say hello and thank you, Marie, for being here to share.
Thank you so much, Jay, for the invitation. I'm excited to engage with this group and, looking forward to some of the comments and chatter in the chat box as well. Let me get the screen here. All right. So we have a lot to cover, and I want to make sure that we are addressing questions in the room. I'm just curious, you have lots of options of where you could be. I've already taught 2 webinars today, and I'm excited to be here with Jay for this podcast. You have lots of options where you can spend your time and energy. What got you out of bed? What got you away from your meetings to come to this session? What are you hoping to walk away with today? So if you could go in the chat box, let me know what's that take it away, use it today thing you're looking for, because I want to make sure that I'm sharing through the lens of the what you are hoping to take away from today's conversation. So again, in the chat box, I'm enjoying seeing where you're from. It looks like we got people from all over the country, but what are you hoping to take away and use today as a result of today's conversation? That will also allow me to point you in the direction of some of the free resources I'll be sharing at the end of the session today. All right, so Julie's looking to be more efficient. Some of you are wanting to reclaim time. I just taught a session on time vampires earlier today, and that was a lot of fun. And we don't realize how many things just kind of suck the minutes out of our hours and days. Reminders of how to use more time more efficiently on grants. Okay, track language. I'm reading through some of these. Hi, Eddie. Let's see. All right, some more efficiency, super small team. Okay. So most of you are looking for the time-saving piece of that. You're in the right place because this is all about time-saving grant templates. And I'm going to go ahead and put a disclaimer out there. I'm using the word grant templates today because it's quick and easy. You may have used this term master grant application or master grant narrative or master grant proposal. Just know that I'm using the term grant template in the same way, and that you can use the term that resonates the most with you. So Jay already did a little bit of an introduction, but I am Marie Palacios, and Mandy Pierce, my business partner, is on the left of the screen. And you may be thinking, why is she here sharing about grants? Well, grants are near and dear to my heart because it was one of the first ways that kind of cut my teeth in the nonprofit sector. I'll give you a little story background so you know who you're dealing with today, and then we'll move forward with the content. I originally was in college for pre-med. I thought I'm going to be pre-med physical therapist. And then I just happened through the university to be teaching some Spanish labs. They had picked me out and said, hey, would you teach some of our Spanish labs while you're a student? Because I love Spanish and was working abroad and different things. And I thought, well, there's a Latino center right down the block. I'm going to go down there and see if I can volunteer and take some of our Spanish students from the university so we can use the language. I walked in and met the executive director and I said, hey, I'm a student next door and I want to know how I can volunteer with you today and use some of my Spanish. And she said, there are some kids there. I'm working with their parents to get them adjusted in the community. They don't speak English. Could you help their children with homework? So I said, sure, why not? I'm one of 6 kids. I'm used to helping kids with homework. So I thought, let's do this. At the end of the session, the lady came up and said, thank you so much. I have no idea to help them with homework. Could I bring them back next week? I said, sure. So I gave her my schedule. And within a month, I had gone from 2 or 3 students to close to 40. So started recruiting more of my friends and education majors at the college that I was in at the time, the university, and walking them down there. And it didn't take but a couple months for that program to just completely take off. And I asked the director, I'm like, who's in charge of this? And she said, it looks like you are. So there I was, full-time student, young and dumb as far as nonprofits. And I thought, how am I going to do this? Because every time the college goes on a break, I lose all my tutors. And I remember one day standing in the room with close to 70 students going, how am I going to do this? And someone suggested grants. And one of the board members said, I've written grants before and there's a state grant coming out. And I think we would be eligible. I had never written a grant. I had never heard of grants. I called the grant officer and she said, you've got about as much chance as a snowball's chance in hell. Literally what she told me to get this grant. You're 21 years old. You've never written a grant. You barely started your program and you have to have the director of juvenile justice sign a letter of support for your program before you're even considered. So good luck with that. It's due in a week. So I started mapping out the program. I talked to some people in the community about what the community need, got juvenile justice guy on the phone and he said, I don't know you from Adam. I'm not going to write a letter. I called him back every day for 5 days and said, just consider it. You don't have to say you'll support my program, but a program like it, that this is needed. And he said, what are you going to do if you don't get my support letter? I said, I'll find something else, but this grant would be a blessing to so many kids. So I wrote the grant, stayed up day and night for about a week. First grant happened to be a state grant, was miserable process. And the day it was due in Raleigh, the head of juvenile justice called me up and said, come get your letter. It's signed and waiting on you. And it's very generic, but we'll see where this goes. That was the first grant I ever wrote and got for close to $87,000. And that started my grant journey. I thought, what an amazing thing that I can have this idea, see a need in the community, help work with the community, come up with a solution, and write a grant proposal, and someone's going to buy in enough to give me close to $100,000. This is amazing. So that was what started my grant career, but it was my changing life realities that made me say, how can I move away from traditional grant writing to grant templates? And that's where we're going to talk about today. So here are a couple takeaways that I'm hoping you will get is a better understanding of primary components of grant proposals. If you're new, if you're not a newbie, then you'll bear with me on that. You'll see things you're already familiar with, ways to develop a basic grant writing toolkit to expedite your proposal writing process, how to modify your writing style to ensure that your proposal packs a punch, and ways to identify and provide key information that donors are requesting in each grant section. So those are some of the things that we're going to cover. Again, it's all about efficiency and things like that as we move forward. So why a grant template? Why a master grant application, master grant proposal, whatever you want to call it, master grant narrative? Why? I'm going to let you answer that question for you, but I can tell you the moment that I got away from traditional grant writing. Mandy and I originally, Owner Funding for Good, we started out in the grants world. We were both in the nonprofit sector. I was the program director for that children's program for almost a decade. Funny story, one of my students is now running it now, so it's still there. And then I became an executive director. And Mandy was working in her field and we were partnering. And she said, I know that you do grant writing because guess what? That first grant led to many more. And I'd like to work with you on state and federal grants because I don't like to write those alone. We ended up getting a reputation in the community for great grant writers, and we went on contract or retainer with a local hospital. And we were writing for mammogram units and NICU and all that fun stuff. And every time they would send, she would do research and she'd send me a proposal, I felt like I was always rushing to beat the deadline. And it was stressful The hospital foundation was supposed to send me a list of things they needed. We need a $3 million mobile mammogram unit. We need NICU equipment valued at this amount and some descriptions. And I would have this form that I would send them, and I would say, I need this information so I can write a grant. And I would wait till the proposal came out, and then I wrote it. And then what I would do is the next proposal for that same project, I'd go back to my original grant application for whatever foundation it was, or state group or federal group, and I would use that as my template. How many of you have used your first grant as the template for all your subsequent grants? How many of you say, oh, I've written it once, let me just copy and paste that? I'd venture to say that if you've written multiple grants for a single project, that's what we all do, because we're all about saving time. Of course, Jessica says yes. Well, this is what I found to be true. It's kind of like that game of childhood game telephone, where you're sitting on the playground and you whisper in your friend's ear, you know, monkeys like bananas. And by the time it gets through the end, it's gorillas ride motorcycles. And you're like, well, there's some kind of chimpanzee monkey thing going on in there, but it's not the same statement. It got shaded. The truth, the reality got shaded every time it passed hands. That's what's happening with our master grant proposals. What's happening is we write it through the lens of the first foundation, and we're looking at their RFP, their request for proposals, and that says, let us know how this impacts X, Y, or Z, and you put that in the proposal, and then you're using that proposal in the next one, and you're looking at what the donor's looking for, and it's all getting shaded. And 3 or 4 or 5 grants down the line, it's not as similar to the original source project as you would have hoped. I realized this when I was writing for the hospital, that there was a grant, I think it was Draft Foundation or something like that. And their whole thing about the NICU equipment was, how does it ease the burden on parents or caregivers? And it wasn't necessarily about the impact of the child. That was important, but this was really about easing the burden on the caregivers. So all the grants written after that were focused on that, but some of the donors were really interested on the impact on the child. And I thought, you know what, there's got to be a better way. Let me look at coming up with a master grant template that I can use as my source document. And every time I write a grant, I'm going to go to the source, and then I will capture the lens, the passion and priorities of each grantor individually versus working from a prior grant application. And that's where I started my first master grant application. I realized it would provide consistency, because donors talk. And if I say, oh, I'm looking for a $100,000 program budget, and then I tell someone else it's 150, and someone else it's 200, all of a sudden it gets shaded. And the efficiency, obviously, I'm going to be a little quicker if I'm going to a source document and I'm not afraid I'm going to include another donor's names. How many of you, when copying and pasting, accidentally left another donor's name or a reference that was inaccurate because your brain already says, I know what this is supposed to say? So there's the efficiency, we're copying and pasting, but there's more likelihood for error. There's the transparency, as we're saying, this is our project, take it or leave it. We're going to write the proposals, but this is what we've got. Like I said, the accuracy, we want to make sure that we're not leaving other donors' information there, but it also makes sure that we're grant ready. What I found is that many times the hospital and my other clients didn't have the funding opportunity in front of us yet, but they knew what project needed to be funding in the coming year to 18 months. So what I would do is I would spend the front end of the time developing the project and the grant kind of narrative. And then when an opportunity became available, I was ready to apply. A couple ways we do that is organizing key documents. If you have a shared file system, that's going to be an awesome way to do this, but you're going to have a folder that's all financial documents, the things you would most likely need in any grant proposal. If your organization's of a certain size, if an audit, if you don't do an audit, maybe it's your most recent compilation report or 990. You'll need your most recent P&Ls, operating budget, tax ID. You'll probably even need that program budget in there. So this is just a couple samples, but I like to have my grant readiness folder titled Grant Readiness. And then the subfolders inside of it is financial docs, research, impact data, supporting docs, staff, strategic plan, program goals, and then any kind of grant opportunities and reporting tools. Those are the folders that I like to keep organized so that my grant processes stay streamlined. In my research box, in my research folder, I can have those needs assessments or statements ready to go. If I know that we need a mobile mammogram unit, but we're not quite ready to apply for a grant, I can still do the needs assessment. I can still say the statement of need. We need $3.4 million for this. And this is why we need to reach women in rural communities. We have a large geographic footprint, but it's rural. The impact data, those are things that you don't want to be waiting till the last minute. I'm sure if you've been writing grants for any period of time, you've had to track down information. You're tracking down an accountant, a CPA, maybe you have a volunteer bookkeeper if you're a small organization, and it's hard to get this information at the last minute. I found that when I had to email my accountant or email a board member for information that was current and relevant, it took a lot of time. So creating a shared file system allowed me to say, hey, I need you to go in once a month and just put it on your calendar that you're going to make sure all the documents you're responsible for are the most recent form. So my CPA would go in and make sure that I had the most recent copy of P&L, operating budget, all those things. And anything that was current stayed in that main financial docs folder. Anything that was post or projecting in the future would go into archives or future projections. And we each knew how to manage our folders. So again, this work can be happening behind the scenes. In addition to structuring all of the documents, the supporting things you need for your grants, we have to think about how we're structuring the document. I like to divide it into 10 categories. I know some of the consultants that I coach and that we work with through Funding for Good, they like to do it in 12 or 14. This is really a personal preference, but you want to see some of these things in the structure of your grant template. One is going to be the purpose of the program or the project. The other is going to be the organizational history, the executive summary, which is basically your snapshot of your grant proposal, your needs assessment, statement of need, we just call it the need, your program description or project design. I'm using those words interchangeably, but we'll talk about the difference in a moment. Goals and objectives, evaluation measures, capacity, history of success, your sustainability plan, and then finally your budget narrative and all of that information. Those are things that we're going to see. Now, under the program description and design, you'll see things like timeline, other capacity things, but I've just got them in the broad categories here. I'm going to break each of those things down and let you, so that we can discuss those. And, you know, again, we strive for productivity, not perfection. So there may be, you know, we'll look at these and say, these aren't going to always be the perfect examples, but we want you to get an idea. So short and sweet. The purpose statement should encapsulate the why and the what, if possible. We tend to focus on the what when we write grants. I'm going to offer after-school program for kids. That's the what. Well, why? Oh, because they need academic support and enrichment opportunities. So what? Well, because we know that children who can't read fluently by third grade are 50% more likely to fail in their studies and not graduate. So what? Well, the statistics show us that of children who don't graduate from school and have a trade or a career path set forward, they are X% more likely to engage in truancy and end up in the prison system. Like, you can keep asking, so what? And that gets to the impact of your program or project. So when we think about the purpose statement, I'm going to encourage you to ask, so what, until you get to the real aha, that's why we're doing this. And you want to lead with that impact. So a sample: to improve the health of 500 Liberian families by expanding our Waterworks program between 2022 and 2023. This is from pulled from a client work. And again, I'm kind of just sharing a couple things here. To improve the health, so the why, of 500 Liberian families by doing what, or through doing what? Expanding our Waterworks program. The word expanding lets us know that this is not a new program, but that it's building the capacity of a current program or project. Notice they use the word program versus project. So it's an ongoing initiative. Then the next piece is this strategic capacity building initiative. So it lets me know I'm building capacity, will allow filters for families to manufacture. Now I've got a lot of little hyphens here. So this would be where you choose your words. You don't have to use all these. To manufacture or distribute compact, portable water filters capable of producing 250 gallons daily, or 912 million gallons of safe drinking water per family over the 10-year lifespan of the filter. Now, that's a long sentence. I would personally break that up into maybe 2 or even 3, but I wanted you to see the combinations of language you could use. You could stick to the 250 gallons daily. You could say nearly a million gallons of safe drinking water per family over the 10-year lifespan. That's the why, is we want healthy families that have access to 10 years of clean and pure drinking water. So I want you to think about that as you move into the purpose of your grant writing proposal. Like when you say, what's the purpose behind this? The next piece of your template or your master grant application, again, you don't need a specific proposal to do this, is the organizational history. Why were you created? What's the story? What's the need? Are the founders still engaged? Those might be in one bullet point. When was the organization incorporated? What's your mission, your vision? What makes you unique? Now, for many grant proposals, we don't have a lot of space. You have some that your organizational history must be completed in 2 sentences or a sentence, and others that give you a full page. What I typically recommend is that you lead with the most abbreviated version. I do what I call chunking in my proposals. Chunking is saying I lead with the most important information, and I pretend like if I only get 2 sentences or 3 sentences and I had to say, what's the organizational history? What's the bones? What do we have to have structure? Bones. Everything else is meat and fat on those bones. Those are nice, they're wonderful, and I add that if space allows. But the first piece of my master grant template is going to be each section, organizational history. I'm going to give a 2 to 3 sentence abridged version, and then I'm going to have what I considered my expanded version below. So all of my templates have my abridged version first, 2 to 3 sentences, and expanded version of the same content below. Some groups will not give you the space to tell a story. Others are interested in the story. I don't want to have to create that when a proposal is due in 2 days. So I have the abridged and the expanded version already in the organizational history. And for my grant proposals, you may have a very brief 2 sentence, you may have a 5 sentence, and then you may have a 15 or 20 sentence organizational history, and you can tier them so that you can pull any one that you like out of that grant, a master grant template, because you'll be copying and pasting or cutting it into, putting it into another grant proposal. Your executive summary is exactly what it sounds like. It's the description of your grant proposal. You know, I teach a training on the difference between LOIs, letters of inquiries, and executive summary. There's a real simple difference. Executive summary is attached to your full proposal. It's designed to allow the reviewers to get a quick snapshot. It's like an abstract of your proposal, so they know, this is what I can expect to read. An LOI is usually submitted in advance so that you're not spending too much time on a full proposal until you're deemed a good match. So letter of inquiry is saying, hey, are we a good match before we all spend time and energy on this? Executive summary is part of your main proposal. I use my executive summary many times for other purposes. I'll share that in a moment. Who are you? What do you propose to do? Who will your program or project serve and impact? How will you evaluate success of the program or project? What's your timeline? Who's your collaborators? And what are you requesting from the prospective donor? If you write 1 to 3 sentences on each of these things, you're going to have a pretty solid executive summary. The who are you is where I see most people start weak. Almost every newbie grant writer that I review proposals for leads with the mission of the organization. That's the what you do. And I know it's what people get excited about because we want to roll our sleeves up and say, we provide food for, we address hunger disparities, we work with children. That's great. But that's the what, that's not the why. The vision of the organization or the program or the project is the why. It's the why you exist. So if I run a nonprofit and my vision is no neighbor hungry in Burke County where I live, that's inspiring. Hey, our organization, Neighbors Pantry, has a vision of no neighbor hungry in Burke County. We are a nonprofit organization located in Burke County with a vision of no neighbor hungry. The why is inspiring. So I encourage you to lead with who you are. There's a difference. There's different tiers in your identification, what you call core identity statement. So when you do a grant, you're sharing your core identity. You're saying, this is who we are. You have your vision statement, the why you exist. No neighbor hungry in Burke. You have the mission, what you do and how. We address hunger disparities through food pantries, soup kitchens, XYZ. And then you may have your tagline. But I would encourage you to think of your unicorn statement, your unique statement, because I'm not always just what I do. Today, I'm with you as Marie Palacios, lead consultant for Funding for Good, because that's the platform I'm on. I'm working in the nonprofit sector today. If I'm working in my other side of my business is all about language, diversity, inclusion. I work in Guatemala. I've worked in the Latino community for years. I may be coming in as your interpreter or diversity training educator or community, community bridge. If I introduce you as, I am co-founder of my husband's construction company. It depends on who I'm introducing myself, on how I introduce myself. So for each program, project, or organization, you may have multiple what I call unicorn statements. That is the thing you lead with. Hi, we are. So when you introduce yourself in the executive summary, it might be, we are Johnson County's only food bank. We are the largest. We are the longest serving. So lead with that packing the punch. What makes you unique? Then go into your vision and mission. We tend to start with the mission, like I said, but I encourage you to lead with your unicorn identity statement. In my grant templates, I have a master one for the organization. We are Johnson County's only food pantry. I have different unicorn statements. We are the largest after-school program. We are the only X, Y, or Z that does X, Y, or Z. I have unicorn statements for each program or project in their templates. Does that make sense to people? Kind of the unicorn statement. Does that make sense? So we're not just telling people we do this. I know you do that, but I want to know if you're a nonprofit headquartered in an urban area, rural area, if you're the largest. In the past, grant proposals were all about competition. Competition makes us faster, but collaboration makes us better. So when I first started my grant writing career, it was all about, why are you better? Why are you more equipped? Because donors wanted to fund back the best horse. Now it's all about collaboration. They want back the most sustainable horses. And they realize, hey, we don't want to back just one horse because that horse could fall. We want multiple horses. We want you collaborating. So you want your executive summary to reflect those collaborations and things as well, if those are a big part of your proposal. When you're writing a grant template, you may just put this section under the need. And there are two parts of needs. What is the difference between a needs assessment and a statement of need? Can anyone pop in the chat box and let me know? Can anyone pop in the chat box? Let me know. What's the difference between needs assessment and statement of need? I'll glance here for a second. Anybody? Let's see. Yes, the why is the purpose. I'm going to go ahead and jump in if I don't see a response. Needs assessment is how you determine the statement of need. Okay, great starting point. So a needs assessment is literally looking at the community you serve, whether it's local, regional, national, and saying, what's the need? It is a community needs assessment. You're looking around and saying, this is the problem, this is the issue that we seek to solve. The statement of need is saying what you as an organization need in order to provide a solution. So if the needs assessment says, hunger is a huge issue in our community. Here's the statistics to back it up. X number of children on free and reduced lunch. X number of people are unhoused or without employment. Then that's the community needs assessment. The statement of need is, in order to provide a solution, we require a mobile food pantry or a new refrigerator for our soup kitchen or whatever it is you need to provide the solution. So in my grant templates, I like to put the need as the major bold piece, and I divide that into two subcategories: the needs assessment, which is the statistics and stories from the community, and the needs statement, which is the statement of resource gaps that we have in our organization. Have both of them in there. Different grantors will ask that question in different ways. If they just say describe the need, I typically go with the needs assessment first and then our solution with our needs statement. Some will specifically ask for an assessment versus a statement of need. So what do you include in that? Shocking data, personal story from your community, but I encourage you to think outside the box. For example, I had a group in, I think it was Asheville, North Carolina, somewhere close to the mountains of North Carolina, reached out to me and they said, there's a need for our program. We provide nutritious food for children in our school system, with the keyword being nutritious. And, not the little Debbie cakes and processed foods and a lot of things that we tend to give out at soup kitchens. And I said, well, talk to me about why this is important. Well, the kids need nutritious food. Well, talk to me about why. So we started asking, so what? And we looked at cause and effect. And we said, a hungry child is not a focused child. A focused child is not able to perform well at school. A hungry child or a child who's consuming food that's not nutritious is probably not a healthy child. Healthy children are absent from school. They may be lethargic. They may be overstimulated from sugar products. So we started looking at cause and effect, the difference between being hungry and needing nutritious foods, and saying, how does that affect the child's well-being, their health, their academic performance, and their long-term prospects? And they were able to create a needs assessment from there. Let's see. Yes, I see several of you saying it's feedback. And your needs assessment could be different ways. It can be community statistics provided through reliable sources such as local government, census data, stuff like that. Or it could be qualitative data that comes from your stakeholders, meaning they're explaining their personal experiences, needs that they've identified in the community as well. So it could be qualitative or quantitative data from your community. If you're using qualitative data, that means people's input, then it needs to be a statistically significant sample size. I just taught this morning a training on stakeholder engagement practices, and a group was telling me that they did a community survey and they wanted me to use it in their strategic planning process. And I was like, how many? I said, I saw the feedback. The feedback was well organized. It had the bullet points of the takeaways. And I said, what was your sample size? 11 people. That is not statistically significant. It should not inform all of your program and project designs and things like that. And it will not compel a donor to action if it's not statistically significant. So if you're using stakeholder feedback, make sure the sample size is statistically significant. So now we're going to move forward into program or project design, and I'm going to use these terms interchangeably today, but they're not. What's the difference between a program and a project? Programs are ongoing and projects have a definite end date. Now, you can have projects within programs. You can have programs that only happen certain times a year. So you may have a summer after school program in the summer, or not after school, a summer camp program. You may have regular Christmas programs or holiday programs if you do that kind of thing. So there can be programs that don't run year round, but they're still an ongoing initiative within the organization. Projects are typically short-term or one-time initiatives. I will use them interchangeably today. I may say the word initiative, just know that we can be talking about program or project, whatever you are writing for. So when you look at the program description and project design, what's the difference? If you say description versus design, someone tell me the difference. If I ask you for a program or project description, how is that different than the design? Can anyone tell me the difference between a program or project description? I've already discussed the difference between program or project, but what's the difference between description and design? There is one, and it's important to know when you're writing a master grant application or a grant template or proposal in general. Anyone know the difference between a description or design? I'm looking through. I see. Okay, what we do and how we do it. Okay, that's a good start. So a description is just the straight facts. This is what we do. So for example, remember that first after school program I told you about, the one I didn't know what I was doing and it took me about a decade to figure it out? Turned out to be one of the largest after school programs in North Carolina for Latino youth grades K through 12. But it was a lot of lessons learned the hard way that I use in our trainings today. And my initial program description was we offer tutoring 3 days a week. At first it was 1 day, then it went to 2 days, then it went to 3 days. And as I built that relationship with juvenile justice and that directory became near and dear to my heart over the years, I went in and sat down with them and I said, you know, I really need to be looking at evidence-based models for this program. What resources do you have? And he started pointing me in the direction of resources. And he said, here's some evidence-based program designs that we've seen work across the country in similar communities. And a couple pieces of information jumped out. One was, in order to see lasting impact or measurable impact on academic scores and changes in behavior, a child needed a minimum of 12 contact hours of that academic and enrichment support weekly, 12 hours. Well, I was only offering, I think at that time, 2 days a week. And that was 6 hours total. And some of them were getting there late, leaving early when parents picked them up. So I thought, uh-oh, I'm already setting these children up for failure because I'm not giving evidence-based practice. So I thought, well, if I do 4 days a week, I've got 12 hours, but they were still, some of them getting picked up early, some of them dropped off late. So I thought, how do I get around this? So what I did is I moved the program design from a, random schedule of what worked with me and my friends to what was best practice. And that was going to be 5 days a week, 3 hours after school each week. So it was like 3 to 6. And that allowed for a total of 15 contact hours. So if I were giving you the program description, I would say the after school program offers 15 direct contact hours a week. That's the description. A program design would say our program offers 15 contact hours a week because evidence-based practices demonstrate that a child needs a minimum of 12 hours, given the fact that children get logged in 30 minutes late or early due to transportation variations. We have adapted the program model in this way. I can say that more concisely in writing, but essentially the description is the what you do. The program design tells the what along with the logic behind it, the why behind it. So I encourage you to have your program description. This is what we do, but be putting in there, this is what we do. This is the contact hours. Here's why. This is what we do with staff. Here's why. So for everything you do in your program, be prepared to explain evidence-based models behind it. And there is a difference between evidence-based and proven and things like that. We'll talk about that in a moment. As you're writing your template, you've got all those 10 different pieces, and you might just get a Word document and you might put those 10 bullet points, and you may start with what you call your abbreviated master template and then your expanded one. So it's essentially 2 templates in one. And you can, or you can turn them into 2 separate documents. I like having them in one because I need to copy and paste into proposals, and sometimes I like the language in one better than the other, but I keep them in one. Here's your writing tips. Lead strong. Now I come from like I said, 3 generations of English grammar teachers, creative writers. And I always thought we're supposed to lead up to stuff. We're supposed to lead up and build suspense. No donor wants you to build up suspense. They want you to answer the question they asked. So when you lead strong, you say, what is the purpose of this section of my grant template? Is it the organizational history? Talk about the history, not the future. Is it your organizational capacity? Speak about capacity. Break it down into human capacity, resource capacity, those partnership capacity. Break it down into chunks so that you can chunk that out and put them in the proper space, but lead strong. This is going to be important. So for example, name of the organization proposes to achieve what goal? We propose to improve academic scores of, we propose to transform the lives of, or produce clean drinking water for, or increase health outcomes for. Whatever you can say, we plan to do, but you have to be able to back it up with data if you're going to propose to do it. Use active voice instead of the passive voice when possible. So lead strong, and I am going to put this disclaimer out there. In my templates, I lead strong like we propose to do this, and I put it in the order that makes sense to me. I chunk it out, like I said, in paragraphs. Each donor has a different person or entity creating their applications, and while they may be very similar, some of them have very particular things they're looking for. Answer the questions they ask first. So don't just copy and paste that whole chunk into their grant proposal. Look at what they ask for and reorganize and say, okay, they're asking me about human capacity before they're asking me about resource capacity. Lead with whatever the donor asks you for. So I chunk it out in my grant template so that when I see what the donor's asking for, I can move that paragraph up. I come from a creative writing background where we weave everything together like a beautiful tapestry. In grant writing, don't weave, chunk, because you need to be able to extract it without having to go back and rewrite everything. So no weaving, chunking in grant writing. You can still weave compound and simple sentences together, but don't weave all your concepts together because it's going to make it harder to use your master grant application in multiple with multiple proposals. So chunk, chunk, chunk is my key advice. Be generally specific. That sounds like an oxymoron, but you want to be specific enough to show the donor you know what you're talking about, general enough that you don't box yourself in. My first grant, I wrote something like, we will have the Catawba Science Center come over once a week on Mondays from 3 to 4 to offer STEM programming. What if they can't do that? What if their staff member quits, or their capacity changes, or their schedule changes, or your schedule changes? So I started using language like, we are committed to offering a minimum of 5 hours of STEM programming weekly through qualified community partners such as our local science center. Then I have flexibility on the dates, the times. I can say an average of 5 hours weekly. So if it's a holiday week, I didn't commit to every Monday. I'm saying I can just put in some extra hours during the summer months and make that average out. So it gives me opportunity to move around, because if you're writing a state or federal grant, what you write in there becomes your contract. So I like to give myself a little bit of grace. Pay attention to sentence structure. Put your key information at the beginning and the end. If you're using commas, I recommend keep it to 3 commas or less. Most people can't digest more than 3 chunks of information. I told you I come from an interpreter background, and trained interpreter used to work in the courts and domestic violence stuff. And I know going through trainings, I was told our brain wants to capture 3 to 4 pieces of information. Once we get to 5, 6, 7, we shut down. And we had to train ourselves to remember more. You don't want your donors to have to go back and reread to capture what you're saying. So watch out for those run-ons. If you're going to put 3 pieces of information, lead with the most important thing, sandwich the 3rd piece of thing in there, and then put the next most important thing. So we are doing these 3 things, 1, 2, 3. Now, if you say in order of priority, then you can put them in order of priority. Otherwise, you put your most important thing at the beginning and the end, because that's what people will read when they're scanning. Balance simple and compound sentences. Watch out for run-ons like the one that was in that first slide. That's a good example of, great information, but I would break it up. But that was from an actual grant from a client. And then I'm giving you some examples here. One of the first Susan G. Komen grants I wrote, again, newbie, very young, I put in there, health programs will be offered to women who need breast cancer education and screenings. Years later, I wrote that same grant, and the language changed to, our bilingual program director will facilitate targeted breast cancer awareness events and medical screenings for a minimum of 100 Latino women ages 25 plus in the Unifor region. Look at the difference. This will be offered. We don't know if it's going to be the primary partner at the health department, if our organization is offering this, what kind of education, what kind of screenings. But by taking out at the will be offered, the passive voice, and saying the who, we put that in there. For foundation grants, private foundation grants, you can use the 3rd person. You can use the 1st person plural, we. You will never in any grant use 1st person singular, I, never acceptable. That would be reserved for a direct letter to a contact, never a grant proposal. Private foundations will allow the we. State and federal grants typically do not want a we because they are reading so many and it becomes ambiguous. Is the we the partner? Is it the primary investigator? Is it there's too many entities. State and federal grants usually have multiple partners. And when you say we, they don't know who the we is. So I encourage you when you write your grants, even if you're writing only for foundations, to go through and every time you see the word we, take out the we and say, who's the we? Our bilingual program director, our full-time staff, our core team of volunteers, and insert the proper party to show you've got this covered. Otherwise, the we becomes very ambiguous and the donor is not necessarily assured that you have the capacity to move forward. Any questions so far? Someone asked, did I get the first proposal? Yes, I got that 87,000 that I got for that grant. It was the first one I ended up raising. I got that grant for close to 8 to 9 years because of our performance reviews until the recession hit in 2008 and 9. And then I just love the fact that I could write a grant and get all kinds of crazy money and then help other organizations do the same. So the second, yep, someone says the second option feels much stronger. Yep. So let's talk about goals and objective now. They need to meet the SMART criteria, or what I call the KISS method, keep it simple, sweetie. This is straight from one of those state federal grants. This was the TANF grant, the infamous grant that I had no clue how to write. We intend to propose to increase the reading scores of a minimum of 75 of Brown County's third grade students by 25% during this particular school year. That's dry, it's boring, but it's what the state and federal mandates required. It was a required objective, but as far as the percentage based on the end. Notice that I did not say we will. Because when you get a state or federal grant, it becomes a contract and you could have to pay that money back if you don't follow your contract. Not all the time, but most of the time. I like to change the word we will to we intend to, we are committed to, we propose to, or we are intent on doing, but we intend to, propose to, or are committed to. Gives strong language without binding you into 100% certainty, because nothing in life is 100% certain. You'll also notice that I said a minimum of 75% of the students. And if you notice that 75 of the students is not my full 100 students, you need to be looking at your goals. If you say 100% of anything, then I'm going to be concerned for you, because transition happens, turnover happens. So I went to my school system and said, what is the average turnovers of your students within a given school year? And it was like 18% or something like that. So I knew automatically that 18% of my metrics were going to be gone because of just transitions I couldn't control. So why would I say 100% if 18% of my students are likely going to transition out of the school system during the year? And then on top of that, I have kids that no matter how hard they try, we've got other barriers to address before we can really get them into a learning space. Some kids are overcoming trauma. Some kids may be getting there late. There's just so many barriers I can't control. So I'm not going to say, other than the 18% that are going to turn over, I'm going to have 100% success. For the school system for TANF, which was through DSS in North Carolina, they indicated that anything over a 75% success rate was success in their books. Over 2 decades of working with donors, I can tell you that most donors feel the same. 75% success rates are pretty darn good. And that you may have to reframe and things like that, but a 75% success rate, and it depends on what that is. I'm going to show you very quickly a program in the box, and this is, let me pull it up for you just 1 second. You're going to see it pop up on here, and then I'm going to show you where to find it on our screen. So give me 1 second. It is under my bonus handouts. I'm going to give you the one that has the sample. It's not pretty, but I have the blank sample of this in the website, so you can pull up a blank version. But I've had a lot of people say, you know, I really want the sample one that you gave. And again, this is coming back to that after school program. But I took this box, and this became one of the first things I called my program in a box. I thought, how am I going to organize a grant template if I don't have my ideas organized? And I am a visual person. So anytime I'm writing a grant template, I never start with the narrative. I start with this program in the box, and you are welcome to steal it off our website for free and do this for yourself. But I look at the program or project name, and then I break down my goals into categories. So for the first one here, you'll see students participating in the after school program will improve their academic skills. That doesn't meet the SMART criteria yet, because it's the overarching goal is academic improvement. The required outcomes, you might call them objectives or SMART goals below, speak to particular topics and learning objectives. I then note the strategies, Those strategies then inform my timelines. And then in another version I also put resources. So I add an extra column. You're welcome to do the same for resources. And that resource column helps me with the budgeting. In addition to academic goals, I put parent caregiver involvement was a key goal area because evidence-based models showed that parent and caregiver involvement was essential to long-term student success. So that was part of the evidence-based model, was making sure parents were engaged. What were my outcomes, strategies, timelines, evaluation measures, and so forth. And then finally, we had a qualitative goal where this was based on student self-reporting. Would they set high school as a personal goal, high school graduation as a personal goal? So that's what I call my program in a box. And it is, you can find information on that. You can find the template in a blank form on our website, and it is free for you to download and put your logo in and make it your own. As a grant template creator, I truly use this when I'm working with clients. I say, before we have our first pre-design call, just take a stab at this. Sometimes if they're completely lost, and I'm working with a client, I'll say, let's get on a pre-design call and we'll walk through their program and say, what are your major goal areas? Is it going to be, this academic? Is it enrichment? Is it number of people impacted versus their experience? And we break out the major goal areas and then set objectives after that. Breaking it out that way also allows you to extract it easier for grant proposals. So I have one of those for every grant template that I'm writing. I have the program in the box, and then I have a narrative because I can extract information as needed, and I can get my team members to update that information so it's always current and relevant, and that stays in my file box. So once we have the SMART goals, we have to say, how will we know we were successful? And we use evaluation measures to do that. I use this very simple verbiage, and most of the time I just plug everything into this. Our organization will utilize the following strategies and tools to track the successful implementation, and you don't even have to use the word successful, implementation and completion of the proposed project. And then you may use words like assure the purchase installment of new equipment, and that could be through receipts. Maintain attendance records too. Administer surveys, utilize pre and post tests, complete. You'll notice that I started every single evaluation measure with a verb, because it's my way of mentally, of telling the donor directly, we are taking action to evaluate. I could just say, we will use attendance records, we will use this, and that's fine too. So you can put the thing first, attendance records, surveys, if you're limited. So you'll have your abbreviated version might be, we'll use the following, attendance records, blah, blah, blah. And then you may have your expanded version with something like this. As you think about your program and project budget, I want you to think about the total budget, and don't forget to include your overhead. In your master grant template, you are going to put the entire program project budget. It doesn't matter if it's in kind or not. A lot of times our organizations put their budget together thinking, oh, it's only what we still need in cash. And that's not true. It's all the things that go into your program. So if you get $1,000 worth of in-kind space every month for your program, that is in your budget as space. And I like to denote it like this when I'm sending it to donors. I say, here's our program budget, and this is what we've secured in kind. So including your entire budget, regardless of how much is offered in kind or through volunteers, allows you to do several things. One, let me give you a real practical example. We were working with an animal welfare group. They explained their street dog rescue program included dog food, leashes, all these things. They got incredible donations from that. So when they wrote their grant, they said they had a $50,000 program. And then they were going to ask a donor for $50,000. So they're essentially asking for 100% of the project budget. And not all donors want to do that. When we deconstructed their budget, we realized they had not included the hundreds and thousands of dollars, not hundreds and thousands of dollars provided in kind from local vets. PetSmart was giving them food, all these things. And we realized they actually had a $150,000 program project budget, but $100,000 was offered in kind through local vets, PetSmart, volunteers, etc. So there's a huge difference between going to a donor and saying, I need $50,000. It is a third of my operating budget or my program budget, or I need $50,000. It's 100%. So make sure that whenever you have these program project budgets, you can even break it out in your cheat sheet budget for your grant template. You can say, here's the total project or program amount. Here's what we have in kind, and here's the cash balance. And then you can even keep in that budget form anything that you have pending, anything that you have secured, and keep it all in that budget information, because a lot of your grants are going to say, how much do you have in kind? How much do you have in this? So keeping track of the in-kind allows you to show the donor, we know what it really costs to run our program, but it does something else even more powerful. It allows the donor to see your community's already buying in and they believe in you. So if I can say 2/3 of my budget is funded through the generous partners in our community, it shows credibility. It shows community buy-in, and a donor is more likely to do the same. So remember that as you go through your budgeting processes. Select a user-friendly template and use it for all your program and project budgets so it's easy for you to identify. Change it up only when the donor requires you to use their budgets. In that cheat sheet, you'll want to know your key percentages. What's the number of individual donors, corporate donors, events, grants, state and federal funds? Some grants will ask that. I like to have the math already ready in my financial folder. Couple more things, then we're going to take questions. Capacity, history of success. You can use your impact reporting from prior things to share that. You can use specific milestones, professional success of leaders involved, or projected success based on similar programs. So if you're a new program and they ask you for your capacity or history of success, you won't have a long history to share. So you're going to need to be able to share the history of success of those spearheading or implementing your project. Or you can say, we are using an evidence-based model that has a long history of success, and share the history of success of your model. You can also use overall organizational impact history to say, we have a history of doing what we say we're going to do. And then finally, we have a sustainability plan. We have a sample of this on our website. I'll share that with you in a moment. You can keep this brief. You're going to establish your diversified funding streams. You're going to share how proposed grant fundings will contribute to long-term sustainability. So I like to bullet point this in my template and have some things that are like, this is how it'll build capacity. This is how it will fund an immediate need. And I extract the things I need for specific proposals. If I'm writing for Ronald McDonald Foundation, they want direct funds towards children. They want those feel good. I'm giving a computer to a child, a bed to a child. That may not be creating sustainability. So I pull out the pieces of the budget that are sustainability and those that are direct service, the things that some donors want to see. Let your donors know if your funds will allow you to hire a new staff member who will assume fundraising responsibilities, will help you increase your donor base. So as you're thinking about your sustainability plan, you're thinking, how will the dollars this donor invests in this program or project help us serve more, do more, be more sustainable or successful in the future? And if you can ask those questions in advance, you don't even need to know the particular proposal yet. You'll have this ready for your grant proposals. Final thing to consider is your budget narrative justifications. You can use complete sentences, and I give you an example there, and you'll be getting slides. So I'm not going to read all of those, but you can also use formulas. The tips I will share is use descriptive words like the donor funds will fund. That means it's basically going to cover, offset the cost of, support, enable, grow, increase, supplement, create capacity. Use descriptive verbs. Don't just say will fund through the whole thing. Will cover, will offset, will enable, will improve, and show the impact of the dollars, because donors are investors and donors want to invest in our impact. The only difference between a grant donor and a business donor in the for-profit is banks in the for-profit or donors in the for-profit look for a return on investment in dollar signs, and donors in the nonprofit sector are looking for a return on investment in the form of impact. You can reflect impact throughout your entire master grant application in showing your purpose, the needs assessment, your solutions, but also in the way you present the budget narrative. You're going to always want to make sure you get fresh eyes on it, because we'll miss the typos, we'll miss the things. Make sure a random reviewer with no knowledge of your program can capture the vision. So get someone that's not familiar to read the proposal and see what they say and take their feedback. Get someone who's an expert in your field to read it and see if they believe it's on track, because they may say, ooh, there's some holes here. And then make sure your grammar, syntax, and content all marry into that winning proposal. And I know a lot of people are using AI. I don't use AI to write my grants. That's another conversation. I do use Grammarly to check sentence structure and things like that. And I love the Grammarly subscription. So that's something worth checking out. So I'm going to encourage you to go over to the chat box. Let me know if you have any questions. And while you're typing those in, and Jay and Jack are pulling those out, I'm going to point you in the direction of a few tools because I know we're getting closer to the end of our time. But we have a treasure trove of resources. You're going to get the PowerPoint slides, the program in the box. I'm going to show you where to find that, sample summaries. But you can come to fundingforgood.org, and let me just come over to that on my page, and I'm going to show you where to find it right now. Okay, So if you come to fundingforgood.org, you're going to see our webpage like this. And there's the about page right there. So this is what you'll see, the landing page. And you can come all the way over to the resource page. Now you can go to blogs, and we have lots of blogs on grant writing and leadership development and all those things. And we have events, but where I'm going to point you is the templates. The templates are here to make your life easier. I got very tired as a nonprofit director, as a program director, and as a consultant typing in template 4 and being asked for my credit card. They're banking on the fact you'll forget to cancel it, because we usually do, and that's where they get their money. We will never ask you for your credit card for a free template. This is just stuff. Are all these templates perfect and beautiful? No. These were things we used as regular nonprofit employees to simplify our life. The ones that are paid up above, those we've paid a designer to make those really pretty and user-friendly. These are the ones that are great starting points, and most of them are still very user-friendly. So you might want to come to the grant resources. We've got sample budget line item templates. We have the budget spreadsheet. This goals and action spreadsheet is essentially the program in the box. And you can see that I've added resources needed here. You can download that. Hopefully you can see this on your screen. And you can make it your own. Take our logo out and make it on your own. If it's under our free resources, you don't need to worry about copyright stuff. Just literally use it to advance your work. There's a program abstract. There's a program funding request abstract. Here is your sample sustainability plan. So I mentioned the sustainability plan. I'm giving you a sample here and some of the questions to consider. Hopefully you're seeing that. And if I were going to point you in the direction of something else, the sample memorandum of understanding that's on the right-hand column is really helpful. I've typed in sample content there. So this would be a great resource if you know that you're going to be needing partnership agreements in place. You want those before a grant opportunity comes up. You want them pretty much designed, created, signed. And then if you need to make minor edits, it's easier to go back to your partner and ask for those edits. But I've given you sample partnership letters under the free stuff, and I've given you 2 different memorandum of agreement formats under this one piece. So lots and lots of resources here under the template section of Funding for Good. I'm going to come back over to the PowerPoint and also see if there's any questions. Let's see, current slide. Jay, do we have any questions?
Well, actually, I think you can go ahead and take down the slide deck now. We've managed to, Jack has managed to take all those links and put them in the chat. But we did have one question we had earlier is just about the deck itself. So is that something that you're willing to share? And if so, should people just reach out to you directly?
You have, we sent that to you. I'm not sure if that's on your list, but if people would like that, they can always reach out to us.
Yes.
Marie at fundingforgood.org, Mandy at fundingforgood.org, and we can send that to you if you would like a copy of that.
Great. Okay, we'll make sure we put those in the chat as well, Jack, just so that people can go ahead and write you a note Marie, and get those from you. I also, before we jump into any other questions, so this is a 30-second warning. If you have questions, go ahead and post them right now. Just to let you know that we will not have a session next Tuesday, but next Thursday and the following Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we'll be coming to you live from London and Liverpool. So we'll have sessions with people from Dogs Trust, the English National Opera, and the man behind the Why Philanthropy Matters blog. So I hope you join us for some of those sessions. If you're not already on our list, just make sure you go to, again, DonorSearch.net and sign up so you'll get announcements about all of that. So those will be coming to you at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and we hope you'll join us for that. So let me see. We have what questions are here. I think you answered a lot of the things that were coming at you as they were up on the screen, like that sustainability plan. For.
Yeah, so if you were able to get something you can walk away and use today, put that walk away, use away nugget in the chat box. We like to know what resonates with people who are in these trainings so we can continue to offer those things, whether it's free resources, a tip or a tool, a concept. Feel free to share that if you don't have a question, but that just helps us figure out what people need.
Well, I guess if you wouldn't mind just repeating your email addresses one more time, that would be helpful.
It's Marie at fundingforgood.org. All run together, Marie at fundingforgood.org. And you can email, and there's lots of places on fundingforgood.org to contact us as well.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for this, Marie. I guess we're going to be closing up for now, but I'm sure there are going to be lots of questions that people have after the fact. So please do reach out to her. Look at the Funding for Good site, not just for all those great resources, but also for people who are great resources. You'll find that they are good advisors on all these matters, and they're so important to us. So my thanks to you, Marie. And again, hello to Mandy, who's been in the series before. You can look for an email with a link to a recording of this session that you can share with your colleagues. Please do check it out. And if you don't see that coming to you in the next 48 hours, just look to your spam folder because it'll be there. So until next time, thanks for being here. Our appreciation to Marie and to all of you. We'll look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Until then, take care.